Calvin cycle is the second part of photosynthesis, and it is going to take place in the stroma of the chloroplast. Now, the stroma is the aqueous mixture that is going to surround the thylakoids, which are those stacks of disc inside that are going to allow the light reactions to take place. Now, the Calvin cycle is going to need a couple things in order to take place. The first thing that we see the Calvin cycle needs is carbon dioxide. We also see that it's going to need energy in the form of ATP and electrons, which are going to be carried by NADPH. Both the ATP and the NADPH were made during the light reactions. Now, if we have all of this in place, taking place in the stroma, we see that the Calvin cycle is going to produce sugar, or C6H12O6. It's also then going to use this ATP, and it's going to turn it into ADP. Once these electrons are dropped off, NADPH turns back into NADP+. ADP and NADP+ are going to go back to the thylakoid to store more energy and pick up more electrons and take them to the stroma. Now, we're going to try and keep the Calvin cycle pretty simple here, and we need to know that the first step of our Calvin cycle is that carbon dioxide is going to diffuse through the stomata, which, if you guys remember, the stomata is the opening on the underside of the leaf that lets gases be exchanged, and it's also going to let water in and out of the plant. So carbon dioxide comes in to the stroma, and we see that it's going to bind to a 5-carbon sugar, RUBP. So RUBP has 5 carbon. We have carbon dioxide. When it binds, it's going to form a 6-carbon molecule, but this 6-carbon molecule is not very stable, and it's going to split into 2 of these 3 PGA molecules. Then this will be our step 3. There's 2 of them that have 3 carbon each, so we're still at a total of 6 carbon. Now, this 3 PGA is going to be modified into another molecule called G3P. We'll go ahead and add this down here. And the way that we see 3 PGA turning into G3P is energy made from the light reactions is going to come in. So step 4, ATP is going to provide energy. When that bond is broken between the 2nd and 3rd phosphate, energy is going to be released, and ATP is going to turn into ADP. This ADP is then free to go back to the light reactions. Next step that we see in order to get from 3-PGA to G3P is that electrons carried by the NADPH are going to come in and drop off these electrons. Once these electrons are dropped off, NADPH is going to turn back into NADP+. And again, it's going to head back to the light reactions to pick up more electrons. So 3-PGA with energy and electrons carried by NADPH can be modified into G3P. At the bottom of our cycle here, we see glucose is going to be made. And again, glucose, our formula over here, C6H12O6. And we see G3P is going to be modified back into RUBP so this cycle can continue. In order for this cycle to continue, we see we need a little bit more energy. So ATP is going to provide this energy. When the bonds are broken and energy is released, ADP turns back into ADP. And this is going to then regenerate RUBP. So it can then again bind to another carbon dioxide. Now, for glucose, our C6H12O6, every turn around the Calvin cycle is going to give us only 1 carbon coming from this 1 carbon in our carbon dioxide. In order to get down to C6H12O6, the Calvin cycle has to take place 6 times. So we're going to see 6 times a carbon dioxide is going to come and bind to RUBP. Very, very unstable 6-carbon molecule splits down into 2 3 carbon molecules called PGA. Energy and electrons are going to be used to turn 3 PGA into G3P and drop off a carbon to make glucose. G3P is going to then be modified with more energy to regenerate RUBP. And this is our Calvin cycle.